Rachel Doyle hadn't slept, not really, in 2 days. Not since Wednesday night when her youngest, Mia, had spiked a fever of 103 and her oldest, Tyler, had started throwing up an hour later, and the two of them had passed, the same stomach bug back and forth between them like a cruel game of catch. She'd sat on the bathroom floor at 2 in the morning holding back Mia's hair, then run to Tyler's room when she heard him retching, then back to Mia, then back to Tyler, until the hours blurred into a single grey smear of exhaustion. By Friday afternoon, both kids were finally on the mend, colour back in their cheeks, appetites returning. But their sheets, their clothes, the towels she'd used to mop up sweat and worse, all of it needed washing, and the machine in their apartment building had been broken for going on 3 weeks. Now, a handwritten, out-of-order sign taped over the coin slot that the landlord kept promising to fix. So Rachel loaded 2 garbage bags full of laundry into the trunk of her 10-year-old Civic, buckled Mia into her car seat even though the girl could barely keep her eyes open, and told Tyler, who was 7 and trying so hard to be brave and helpful, that they were going on a little adventure to the laundromat. She did not tell her mother. She did not tell her sister. She hadn't told anyone, really, because in the 3 years since her husband, Danny, had walked out right around the time Mia was born, as if the crying of a newborn had been the final straw he'd been waiting for. Rachel had learned that asking for help usually cost more than it was worth. Her mother would sigh and mention again that she'd warned Rachel about marrying so young. Her sister Kim would say she'd come by if she could get away from work, and then wouldn't. It was easier, cleaner, less humiliating to just do it herself. She had built a life out of doing it herself. The laundromat on 5th Street was one of those old-fashioned kinds with buzzing fluorescent lights and a cracked linoleum floor and a bell over the door that jingled when you walked in. It was nearly empty at 4 in the afternoon, just an elderly man reading a newspaper by the window and a woman in a paint-stained flannel shirt folding towels at the far table. Rachel wrestled the garbage bags out of the trunk, herded Tyler and Mia inside, and began the familiar routine, sorting whites from colors with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else, someone underwater, someone moving through syrup instead of air. Mia started crying almost immediately. Not sick crying, just overtired crying, the kind that comes from a 3-year-old who has been through too much and doesn't have the words for it. Rachel scooped her up, bounced her on her hip, and kept feeding quarters into the machine with her free hand. And somewhere in the middle of it, Tyler asked if he could have $1 for the vending machine. And Rachel said, "Not right now, sweetie." And Tyler's face fell in that specific way that made her chest hurt, because she knew there wasn't $1 to spare, and she hated that he already understood that, at 7 years old, without her ever having to say it out loud. She sat down hard in one of the molded plastic chairs, Mia still fussing against her shoulder, and for just a moment, one single unguarded moment, Rachel let her face do what it wanted to do, which was crumple. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth and closed her eyes and thought, with a clarity that frightened her, that she did not know how much longer she could keep doing this alone. Rough couple of days, huh? Rachel's eyes snapped open. The woman in the paint-stained flannel, she looked to be in her 60s, silver hair pulled back in a loose braid, forearms strong from what Rachel would later learn was decades of contracting work, was standing a few feet away, a half-folded towel still draped over one arm. "I'm sorry," Rachel said automatically, wiping at her eyes. "We're fine. Just tired." "Didn't ask if you were fine," the woman said, not unkindly. "Asked if it's been rough." She glanced at Mia, whose crying had softened into hiccuping sniffles, now that there was a new face to look at. "This one's about done in, and so's her mama, from the looks of it." Something about the bluntness of it, the refusal to let Rachel deflect, with the usual "we're fine, thank you," cracked something loose in her chest. "My kids have been sick since Wednesday," Rachel heard herself say. "Both of them. And our washer's broken at home. So, She gestured helplessly at the machines, at the garbage bags, at the whole exhausting shape of her life laid bare on a laundromat floor. The woman, she introduced herself as Carol, pulled a chair over without being asked and sat down across from Rachel. "You got somebody helping you? Husband? Family?" Rachel let out a short laugh that had no humor in it at all. "It's just me." Carol nodded slowly, like this confirmed something she'd already suspected. "My daughter went through something similar. Different circumstances, but same feeling. That feeling like you're the only adult on Earth and nobody's coming." She reached out, tentative, and rested a hand briefly on Rachel's knee. "You want me to hold her a minute? Give your arms a break?" Rachel almost said no. It was reflexive, the refusing, the way her whole body had learned to brace against needing anyone. But Mia was heavy, and her arms were shaking, and Tyler was watching her with those worried, 7-year-old eyes that had seen too much worry already. And so Rachel said quietly, "Yeah, okay, thank you." Carol took Mia easily, settling her against her shoulder with the practiced competence of someone who had done this 1,000 times, and Mia, exhausted past the point of caring who was holding her, went still. Carol looked over at Tyler. "You hungry, bud? I've got some crackers in my bag if your mom says it's all right." Tyler looked to Rachel, who nodded, and Carol dug a sleeve of saltines out of an enormous canvas tote and handed them over. And for the first time in 2 days, Rachel felt her shoulders drop an inch from around her ears. They talked while the machines churned. Carol asked easy questions. How old the kids were, whether Rachel worked, what she did, and Rachel found herself answering honestly, the words coming out in a low, steady stream she hadn't let herself use in a long time. She worked reception at a dental office 3 days a week, she said, and picked up shifts at a diner on the weekends when she could get someone to watch the kids, which wasn't often, which was why the money was always short, which was why the broken washer at the apartment felt less like an inconvenience and more like one more brick added to a wall that was already too tall to climb. "You ever think about asking your mom for help?" Carol asked. Rachel's jaw tightened. She'd help if I asked right. But there's always a comment attached, always something about how I should have done things different. It's easier to just not. Carol was quiet for a moment, rocking Mia gently. "I get that," she said. "I really do. But I'll tell you something, because I'm old enough now that I don't much care if it's my business or not." She looked at Rachel directly. "Pride's expensive. I paid that bill for years after my husband died, telling everybody I was fine, doing it all myself, because asking felt like losing. And you know what it cost me? It cost me a lot of nights, just like the one you had this week, alone, at 2 in the morning, thinking nobody in the world would notice if I disappeared." She shifted Mia slightly. "Somebody noticed you today. Doesn't mean you're weak for needing it." Rachel felt her throat close up. She looked down at Tyler, who was carefully eating his crackers one at a time, watching the dryers spin like they held some kind of answer, and she thought about how her own family, her mother 2 miles away, her sister with a spare bedroom, and a guest bathroom she never offered, had let 2 days pass without so much as a phone call, while a total stranger in a laundromat had noticed, within 20 minutes, that she was drowning. "I don't even know how to ask," Rachel admitted. "I don't know what it looks like. I've been doing it alone so long I think I forgot there was another way." "It looks like this," Carol said simply. "It looks like sitting down and letting somebody hold your kid for 10 minutes. That's it. That's the whole trick." She smiled, and there were deep lines at the corners of her eyes that spoke of a whole life Rachel knew nothing about. Small stuff first. You don't have to solve the whole thing today. Just today, let it be a little lighter. When the laundry was done, Carol helped Rachel fold it, the two of them working in a companionable rhythm at the long table while Tyler stacked quarters into towers and Mia dozed against a bag of clean towels. Before they left, Carol pressed a business card into Rachel's hand. She did odd jobs around the neighborhood, handy woman work, and she wrote her cell number on the back in blue pen. "You call me if that washer situation doesn't get fixed," she said. I know a guy who does appliance repair cheap. And I know how to make noise at a landlord who's dragging his feet. And you call me," she added softer, "if you just need somebody to hold a kid for 10 minutes again. I mean that." Rachel didn't cry until she got the kids buckled into the car, until Carol had waved once more, through the laundromat window and gone back to her own folding. Then she sat in the driver's seat with her hands on the wheel and let the tears come. But they were different this time, not the tears of 2 sleepless days, but something looser, something that felt almost like relief. That night, after the kids were asleep, Rachel did something she hadn't done in longer than she could remember. She called her mother, not to ask for anything specific, not yet, but just to say, "It's been a really hard week, Mom, and I could use some help." Her mother was quiet for a second, surprised, and then said, in a voice gentler than Rachel expected, "I'll come by tomorrow. I'll bring soup." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The washer at the apartment stayed broken for another 2 weeks before the landlord finally fixed it, and Rachel's mother still slipped in her usual comments now and then, old habits dying slow deaths. But something had shifted, quietly, in a laundromat that smelled like fabric softener and old coffee. On a Friday afternoon, when a stranger named Carol had looked at a young mother crumbling under a weight she'd been carrying alone and simply said, "Let me help." Months later, Carol became a fixture in their lives, fixing a leaky faucet, watching the kids on weekends when Rachel picked up diner shifts, showing up some Sundays with a casserole dish and no explanation needed. Rachel called her eventually family, not blood, but something just as strong, built out of one small, ordinary kindness on one of the worst days of her life. And sometimes, folding laundry alone on a quiet evening, Rachel would think about how close she'd come to never saying a word, to sitting in that plastic chair, with her face crumpled and her heart breaking, and letting the moment pass unnoticed, the way she'd let so many moments pass unnoticed before. All it had taken was one person willing to ask the right question, and one mother finally willing to answer honestly. She kept Carol's business card in her wallet long after she'd memorized the number, a small reminder tucked behind her driver's license, that sometimes the family you need most is the one that finds you when you least expect it, in the most unremarkable of places, doing the most unremarkable of things, just 2 strangers, folding towels, saving each other without ever meaning to.